life blog, Day 99, and I am Kelly Williams.
My name is Jacob Wolf. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you for inviting me here.
Absolutely.
So you work with encaustics. What got you interested in encaustics besides other than painting and?
Well, I started originally as a watercolorist.
Okay.
And I did that for 10 years, and that was a very specific style that I operated through, and I was always frustrated that I couldn't get more texture, and I was always doing really heavy-handed watercolors, and I thought about going into sculpting and those sorts of things, and I actually just went to a demo at an art store and had no knowledge whatsoever of what encaustic was or anything, and I just was in love, and that day I went out and bought my first hot palette, my heat gun, my torch. I was over. Watercolor stuff got put away, and I've been doing this now for another 8 years.
Did you go to school for art?
Nope, I didn't at all. My background's actually psychology and social science.
Interesting.
And so I did a lot of social service work, and then also was at home with my own kids and that sort of deal.
So what got you interested in watercolor then?
So painting for me actually came out of me doing a lot of my own process work, and it was suggested, I was at home, I was having some troubles of my own, and somebody said, go take a class. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I ended up at the Parks and Rec taking a watercolor class and did a ton of my own personal work, and it really grew into something much bigger than that.
Right on.
And so I just painted, and I painted more, and when I started I was terrible and I didn't know anything, and I read a lot of books and a lot of magazines. I took whatever classes I could, and I just kept painting and painting and painting.
So what were your first steps when you switched to encaustics?
So it's a little different as far as setup. So I kind of had to clean out my garage and create a space that allowed me to do it. And again, not a lot of information about it at the time. There's a ton of information out there on it now, but 8 years ago it was a pretty kind of new thing, even though it's an ancient medium. So it's kind of this funny deal. I started just experimenting, and I had a lot of really bad paintings in the beginning and just kept doing it. But now all that watercolor and painting experience in general, my understanding of composition and color and language, that sort of thing, was absolutely applicable to the new medium, and it was just a matter of me getting that skill set and the craftsmanship down and understanding what that medium could do for me so that I could continue to, because for me it's about what I need to say, not how I say it. That's its own derivative. But a lot of people kind of fall in love with encaustic. It's so luminous, and it's so this and it's so that, and all those things are true. But for me, it was much more about the content of the internal process, not just the process of the painting itself, even though the two end up really echoing each other.
For sure. Do you dye all your own waxes?
Yeah, so I have this huge operation in the backyard when I need to make a batch of paint. I buy pharmaceutical grade beeswax, 55 pounds at a time.
Wow.
And I mix that with the Mark crystals, and then I have pigment that I've had shipped from other art making. So it's the same pigments they use in Daniel Smith oil colors. So It's high quality. I don't have the facilities to mill it very fine, but I'm okay with the fact that there's a little bit more texture in it. And so then I make my own batches, and I pour those into molds, and then I can store quite a bit of paint, because I tend to paint large, which is also sort of unusual with encaustic, because it is it's a very expensive medium, especially if you're buying manufactured paint. There's some beautiful paints out there, but it's just cost prohibitive for me, because I do such thick layers and so much texture and large scale stuff. So
I hear that that's one of the big benefits of doing encaustics is just being able to layer.
Exactly. Layers, textures. It's as much about what you take away as what you put on. And so that really, for me, because my intention is often this revealing of a psychological story, one way or another, or an experience, and so I'm trying to communicate in this other language, and my language is of layering, because I think as humans, as our minds are layered. There's what other people see, and then what's right behind that, what's right behind that, and what's underneath that, and what's next to that. And it really provides kind of a physical representation. I refer to it as my internal landscape method, and operate from that place.
Right on. What were your steps in showing your encaustics? Did you start showing right away, or?
I did. I actually started showing pretty quickly. Once my first show was watercolor, and it was your classic coffee shop in the neighborhood had been bugging me saying, "Oh, bring some stuff in," and I was very nervous. I didn't again, with no art background, I wasn't quite sure what I was after, like what was the purpose of me showing this work. Because at the time it wasn't about, I need to make money, and most of the work at that point that I had done was so deeply personal that I wouldn't want to sell any of my early work, but I was starting to get to a point where I had worked through and was starting to express in a different way that felt more engaging with other people, so they could look at it and have their own story reflected back. And I was getting really positive feedback, and people were even deeply moved, and they're like, "You need to show this because this is important work for other people to see and eventually to purchase." So I did the old-fashioned thing, and it was the coffee shops and the New Seasons was a great place because I was able to have a little event, and with each little thing I did, I understood framing better, labeling better, pricing better, marketing in general better. And so with each little show that I did, it grew. I applied to Portland Open Studios, got in. That was really successful for me. Because I can paint and talk and teach, and I love to do that engagement stuff. It really allowed for me to shine in that setting. I had gotten my own studio outside of the house, and that was a big internal shift for me, as far as I am now a professional artist.
For sure.
And not just dabbling on the kitchen table or in my garage.
Right.
And that also allowed me to teach regularly, because at this point I'm one of the few that are a little bit more experienced with the medium, and a lot of people are very interested in trying it but don't necessarily want to invest in a whole set.
Right.
So
so you do abstract work?
I do a combination of stuff. My primary preference is the abstract or symbolic narrative work. So it's not just abstract. There's symbolic narration happening, which will often look abstract to the viewer. I also do some fun stuff, some landscapey, sort of like birch trees or ravens.
You have this here.
Can we see this? So so this shows like a classic birch tree piece that I would do. And what's really neat is, I'm not sure if you can see it with the camera, but it's dug very deeply in here. Yes. So that around each of the trees there's this deep groove that then pulls it out even more. So it almost has a sense of relief sculpture. Not like, can you see? So this is one of the more kind of classic pieces, because people want to commission me to do work for their homes, that sort of thing.
Right.
And my darker work isn't always really appropriate for, say, a home or a medical office. I work in red a lot. It's probably my favorite.
Okay.
But I have to, now that I'm at a different level in my career with it, I need to consider there's the work I do that is still highly personal, engaging work that I often show, like here at White Space, or the work that I do, commissions that I show online. I do smaller fun stuff for Chris at People's. So I did figurative work for a while, and I've kind of grown out of that, or some of my figurative work just hasn't found the right placing yet. So I'm continuing to play, and then I do some other fun stuff. Comic book stores have me do fun little pieces. These will actually have the symbol for serenity in them.
Okay.
If people are familiar with Firefly, the series, it's like a big cult following, and I do Doctor Who pieces, and those are kind of fun. I like those, so I can operate a lot of different areas.
So do you prefer to work on abstract pieces?
I do. My preference would be to do abstract large scale, very, again, symbolic narrative stuff. That is where if I had no issues with time, money, space, equipment, I would be working very, very large.
And are you trying to get your feelings across, or are you trying to bring feelings
Both.
out?
Absolutely both. One of the other things that I do is, beyond teaching, is I do personal work with people. So they'll come into the studio and I help them through the process of developing a painting that reflects their experience. So when I do my own pieces, I'm also trying to allow for people to kind of have a personal experience with the piece, especially as they uncover sort of the meaning behind some of my symbols, and a lot of that has to do with if they can talk to me. Otherwise, they apply their own meaning.
Mm-hmm. Where do you teach?
So I have a private studio behind the Zupiams on West Burnside, and so that's my primary place. I'm starting to do little kind of mini sessions here with people. I've taught large scale groups before on site. I've done several advocacy projects. So I've received RAC grants and done 2 really large projects over the last few years. So This is where my psychology and my social work and my art came together really beautifully.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, so I did a project called Recovery Pains where I worked with people affected by addiction. We all made small pieces that reflected that story. So they get that opportunity to tell that story, and they were hung in windows that looked like, and so each panel was like a window pane, and that was the Recovery Pains project. Worked with over 200 people.
Wow.
And, in different small group settings. And then one of the groups I worked with during that project was PAIR, which is Project Education, Arts and Recreation, and it works with the homeless youth of Portland. And it's very arts and relationship focused, which is perfect for me. Mm-hmm. So I started working with them and developed a program specifically for their population, and got a grant and did a lot of fundraising and worked with their kids for 3 months. And brought all my equipment on site, worked with them almost daily, and they created close to 200 pieces that then showed at PAIR for 2 months in their gallery space.
Wow.
Which was just really powerful, because some of these kids have never told their story before, so to be able to bury their story within the layers and have them be safe was a really powerful experience for them and for me, and then for the viewer. So then when the viewer purchased a piece, they could see the story on the back, so they would hold that, kind of hold space for that person's experience, and then the kids got the money. So it was a really powerful thing, and now I do it more individually. So that's kind of all my little. It's sort of like my art, coming this.
Where all are you showing right now? Here at the White Space?
Here at White Space, I always have some work up here. Actually, I have an upcoming show in May. I'll have a solo show. So first Thursday in May. I have work at People's. Chris has a body of work that he kind of rotates through. I have work at Hunt and Gather. I have work at a bunch of businesses in town.
Okay.
So it gets out and around. So
right.
Some sold, some rented, some just keeping themselves safe on a wall.
Just getting looked at.
Exactly.
What are your goals for the future?
Really right now, finding that mix between teaching, the guidance work that I do with people, and then being able to continue doing my own artwork. And
is this
showing.
a full-time?
This is a full-time gig for me. So I'm learning a lot about small business practices, marketing, accounting,